All right, well, thank you everyone for joining. It looks like most people are on the line. For any of them that join later, they can definitely step in at any time. But I'd like to welcome everyone to the latest VIA Live product training webinar from VIA Global Health. And today we're honored to host Sisu Global Health to talk to you more about the Hemafuse. So before we get into that, I want to talk just quickly about VIA Global Health. For those of you on the line who are not familiar with VIA, we are a medical equipment platform for emerging market medical distributors that makes it fast, easy, and affordable for you to source, quote, purchase, and ship products from around the world. So you can learn more about VIA Global Health by going to the About page. If you click that there, that would take you to our About page, which tells you more about who VIA Global Health is, what we do, any type of partners we work with. There's different videos you can watch. You can learn from what our customers tell us as our feedback about their experience working with us. You can meet the team and then see where our offices are as well. So taking it back to the home page, there's different products, and we try to make it as fast and easy for you to find those products. So you can look through different product categories from respiratory and exam room and all the way through something like textiles and apparel. So if we were to click something like emergency and rescue, what that would do is take us to the page with all of those products listed. So you can see there's 3 pages here of all different products that would range for anything emergency and rescue, one being the Hemafuse, which we'll touch on in just a moment. So bringing it back, there's also the obvious search feature. So if you wanted to look for the Hemafuse, what you would do is just type that in there, and then it'll bring up all results. If you were to type in something like ultrasound, again, that would bring up all the results for those products as well. So a very easy search feature that we know is similar to the way that you search most often. And then what we also try to do is feature our most innovative products on the homepage. So products that are potentially new to the market, or maybe just new to you, something you're not yet aware is in the market, but it's being developed specifically for a market like yours. And we think are the best opportunities for you to have an impact on the health of your communities, but also a positive impact on your business's growth. So if we were to touch just on the Hemafuse here, you can see in the featured innovations, we can take you to the product page. And the product page really functions as a brochure. So it gives you all of the information you need. And we know the information you need because we've heard about it from thousands of different customers looking for information for their private inquiries and government tenders. So we know that you want to see pictures of the product, description about what the product is, what it does, regulatory approvals, which we know are very crucial to your business, especially for tenders, longer descriptions, any key informations and graphics, again, explanations about how it works, specifications, which are important to match with your tenders, and then talking about things like a product brochure, which we know is required for any of your inquiries and tenders. Something we'll add to this page as well is the video from this webinar that we'll be editing together and putting up after we record that. And the key here is really just to get as much information as possible so that you have all of your information before you need to reach out to us and wait for answers. And we know that's the typical process right now with suppliers is you reach out for a quotation, a brochure, and some information, and you maybe get one of your answers, or you get all of the answers, but it's not exactly what you're looking for. So again, we're trying to make that as fast, easy, and affordable for you to find the products and find the information. If you are a verified distributor with us, you would obviously log in and you would see the pricing here. If you're not a verified distributor, you would click on that request a quote. And what that would do is allow you to let us know your contact information. It would allow us to know your expected order quantity. And then once you submit that, we can reach back out to you through our distributor network. And they can help facilitate the quotation as well as any logistics and ordering process. And what I'd like to do is just transition over to Catherine Kirsch, who is CMO and product specialist representing Sisu Global Health for the Hemafuse. And she can take you through a full demonstration of the product, as well as afterwards, answer any of your questions in our Q&A section.
Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending where you are. My name is Catherine Kirsch, and as Brian mentioned, I'm the CMO and product specialist for Sisu Global Health here. So currently calling you from Nairobi, Kenya, which is one of our satellite offices. Sisu Global Health in general is the medical device company specifically aimed at emerging markets. We are based in the US in Baltimore, but we work specifically in markets like Kenya, India, and Ethiopia. doing user data collection in order to make new and innovative devices specifically for customers like yourself. We also work with specific American standards and international standards, including ISO 13485. The reason behind the company is that we really see that 80% of medical devices that are developed are really only developed for 10% of the world's population. So looking at the US and Europe, and we really see a lot of value both for the health impacts and for the businesses in general to interact with a lot of the growing markets that you all are coming from. So. In general, talking about the Hemafuse, which is our premier product, Hemafuse was developed with the idea that over 50% of hospitals do not have the adequate blood supplies that they need. And so we were really looking at a lot of groups in Ghana, Kenya, as well as in other parts of Southern Africa, some of the impacts that was having regarding the number of surgeries that are being canceled, as well as the overall blood shortage that, that restricts on what you need for treating malaria or treating other diseases for that. So one of the things that we came up with was looking at this technique called autotransfusion. Autotransfusion simply means recycling and salvaging a person's own blood rather than using donor blood. There are many different types of autotransfusion, several that are performed in sub-Saharan Africa that I've seen, as well as a long history in the US and Europe of autotransfusion in general. So there's lots of data on this from military all the way to hospital settings for large orthopedic surgeries. And so Hemafuse fits within that kind of family of autotransfusion devices, but is specifically for something called intraoperative autotransfusion. So this idea that in an emergency, you can actually be able to extract blood from a contained cavity, so whether that's the chest cavity or the abdominal cavity, be able to extract that blood and put it into through our filtration system and put it into a blood bag very quickly and effectively. And some of the basic kind of benefits of Hemafuse in general is that instead of being restricted to 1 or 2 units of blood that are coming from the blood bank or whatever the other sources of blood are, it's able to recycle as many units of blood as are in the cavity, though we suggest retransfusing only 2 liters worth. But that restricts a lot of, or allows a lot more freedom for the actual blood bank system in general. The device itself is also reusable. It has a 25-time use on the major syringe parts, which I'll get into a little bit in a second, as well as it comes with 25 accompanying packets for disposables. So it's a bit like this. This is the general packaging that we have for the consumables themselves. So, and generally the device is simpler to use than a lot of the other autotransfusion devices that are on the market currently, as well as designed specifically in mind with what has been seen relating to a lot of the devices. It's also a manually operated device, which is kind of one of the biggest defining factors of the product, and that you don't have to use wall suction, and you don't have to use another electrical base around it to actually use the device itself. This allows a lot of flexibility, especially as you get out to areas that have a theater, but maybe have less access to those blood channels, especially in emergencies. The other component is that we have been looking at how autotransfusions have been developed over that course. And so we based on that technology that was in the US as well as in other parts of the world on autotransfusion in general, and have tested against kind of those predicate devices as well as doing usability in countries such as Ethiopia, Kenya, and Southern Africa. It's also approved and regulatory with the Ghana FDA, as well as the Kenya Pharmacy and Poison Board. Both of those entities function very similar to like the US FDA for their respective markets. And so we've complied with them thoroughly. So to get on to the more fun part, basically the assembly of the device does require a bit of training that is supplied by CC Global through several different forms. But essentially, it's a very simple device that has a very simple kind of pump action that can be used. So these three components are the reusable parts, and so they kind of make up the pump itself. I have attached two of the components that will connect to the blood bag as well as to the ink hour tip, which I'll get into, just for the sake of speed, basically, and time. So to put the device together, you have a filter component, which is basically a elastomer and mesh that is used in a lot of blood and cardiac cases, that also functions as a valve. So this sits like a little basket into the device itself, into the pump of it itself. You would then screw on the nozzle component, which is, again, looking like a bit of a syringe, to put it together. And then you'd also make sure that this O-ring, which would usually come attached to it, but I detached it for the sake of today, is clipped on. So you'll hear it actually snaps on between uses to actually be able to put it into the device. So this whole component, other than the filter, can be autoclaved in a typical steam autoclave at about 121 C for 45 minutes. So typically, like you would do a lot of the metal components that you have in surgery, you can also do this device. The filter and these other components are the disposable uses. So then you would attach, again, I did this beforehand, but you would attach this short tubing to then go into this suction connector, which is this blue component, as well as then you would attach a typical yank hour tip. Sometimes these are called suction tips. I'm sure many of you are familiar with these if you've seen surgery in general. So over here, this is our a basic abdomen or other component. So we'll act like that is a pool of blood, but for the sake of video, it is not red today. So then you would take, so this outlet tubing is attached to this side, which would go, this is the point of this tubing is to actually attach directly to the blood bag. And you would attach first the stopcock connector, which is just a basic piece like this, with a stopcock, which performs to help with air release as the device is being primed, or as you have some air that kind of is released into the device, you can release it very quickly before it gets put into the blood bag. As well as a blood bag spike, which allows you to have it attached to any regular blood bag that it can be found in most laboratories that we've seen around the world. Yes. So these are the major components that we supply with the device. You would also need to supply a blood bag with anticoagulant, as well as an infusion set that would be able to be used to retransfuse the blood from the blood bag. Just to give you a quick picture of what the overall theme looks like is essentially you are suctioning the blood from the abdomen, and then when you push the handle down, it'll go up and into the blood bag. And then when you have it up and into the blood bag, you can detach that blood bag and reinfuse it very quickly into the patient, whether that's in rehabilitation or actually during the surgery. So now that we have the device set up and we can actually do that, this would take a couple of physicians. You would have a nurse or maybe a medical officer, depending where you are, who would actually be holding the device itself, while you have a surgeon who would be orienting in the abdomen or wherever the surgical site is, while he's also looking to confirm or find the bleeder, as well as taper that off. So essentially, then this would also go with the blood bag. I have a fake one here, which we'll attach. Again, this would be a typical one single-use blood bag. that would then be held by the anesthetist and rocked back and forth to mix the anticoagulant, just as if you were donating blood in a typical sense. Okay, so essentially what would happen then is you would have to prime the device, which is basically just making sure the air is released, and there would be kind of a communication between the medical officer or nurse who's doing this and the anesthetist who's doing the other side. So you would draw blood up through, I'm not sure if you can see this very well, but you have about half of the tank full, and then you rotate the device down, oh there you can see it better, and so it's able to actually flow this way. The blood would not flow this way because the filter, as I showed earlier, has a flap that prevents it from going back into the abdomen or surgical capacity in general. So when you push down, I have this a bit off screen, but basically it fills the blood bag pretty effectively or into this other container that I'm actually putting it in for now. And so you would be able to release the air on the other end with this component. So when the air is, when it's this direction, air would be released. And when it's this direction, you will have blood go up and into the blood bag to ensure that the blood safety in general. The general indications for this device is basically that you have significant and contained bleeding. So we look at a lot of cases, including ruptured ectopic pregnancies, pregnancy complications, abdominal and cardiac aneurysms, coronary artery, ruptured liver, ruptured spleens that you can have used with the device. The intention that we look at is for both ops and gynae as well as trauma or emergency or general surgeons who really need to have either a backup that can be available in cases of a quick bleeder or a misstep even, or something that can actually be readily available for the volume of cases they get involving especially ruptured ectopics or traffic accident related incidences. There are a few contraindications, and those relate to if there is biocontamination into the blood. So if there's a puncture in the intestines or stomach, as well as if there is clearly evidence of malignant tumors or coagulopathies. So basically genetic blood disorders or something like that would be a contraindication. I can go more specifically into those contraindications. There are also some, we don't advise against using it in all emergency cases, but we do really see this as something that it is an emergency case and it is up to the physician to make the decision on how to use it. So overall, we are really looking forward to doing more sales in Kenya and Ghana, as well as in other markets that are interested in using this device. So we are also looking to register in new markets and how to go about doing that. And depending on the area, can look at looking at marketing and training support directly with you as a partner and through the VIA network. So thank you, and I look forward to any questions.
Great, thank you very much, Catherine. Just a quick touch on a few things. I'll share my screen again. Questions that came in about certain things like regulatory approvals, specifications. Again, you can find all of that information. I know Catherine mentioned a few of those things here, but if you need more in-depth information on the product page, you can find your regulatory approvals. You can find, again, specifications and your brochures there as well. So I know there's a lot of questions surrounding that information. There's also a lot of questions surrounding quotations, orders, things like that, just general interest. For that, reach out to us directly after that. We won't touch on those questions on the webinar itself, but you can obviously go to the product page here, or you can contact us at sales@viaglobalhealth.com through our WhatsApp line, or you can obviously contact your country representative if you are one of our verified distributors. So quite a few questions have come in, which is I'm not surprised. I think one of the nice transitions from the last point you just mentioned, there's a few people that weren't quite sure. So are you saying there's certain patients or diseases that patients have that would be better not to use this, or is that something that was missed at the end there?
So certain, can you hear me? Yeah, I'm on. So
Yes.
certain blood disorders, in particular, there's, we kind of say we have an absolute contraindication against sickle cell anemia, in particular, mostly because of the biggest concern for our device is cell destruction. And if you have sickle cell anemia, it's not going to do them and a lot of good as far as retransfusing that blood because of the shape of the sickle cell. There are also issues with if they have different coagulopathies, so basically inability to coagulate blood internally. So if they typically, like hemophilia or something like that, they would already have issues with getting blood retransfused to them. Those are the kind of specific blood disorders.
Perfect. And just a reminder for those on the line, if you have a question, just type it into that question section of the software, and I'll be happy to ask that to Catherine directly for you. There are a few more definitely in here, but I just wanted to open that up. So as you mentioned, a couple different blood diseases. Is there any concern with using this with children, with pregnant women, with older populations, or is that general across the board?
No, generally, there's actually quite a few studies out there, especially for emergencies, of the benefits of reusing your own blood rather than donor blood. There's several cases out of Johns Hopkins University and other groups that relay that if you're able to receive whole blood back into you, it increases oxygenation, it increases and can possibly also increase ability to recover faster, and that's across the board because you're also not having to worry all about disease transfer that is potential because you're receiving your own blood overall. So, or other issues with mismatched blood types or something like that. So it's generally considered reducing a lot of those risks overall.
Perfect. And I know you mentioned quickly on this in the demonstration, but there's a few questions about just the benefits of the Hemafuse versus a more traditional electric autotransfusion device. Can you touch just on a little bit on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say one of the biggest electrical devices that we've seen is called the Cell Saver by Haemonetics. And a lot of those devices require significant amounts of training as well as infrastructure. Many of them are also quite expensive for even American hospitals to use. And are really intended to be used in orthopedic or cardiac surgeries that last 8 hours, 10 hours, that sort of thing. And also they end up doing what's called washed autotransfusion. And washed autotransfusion is preferred to do kind of cell separation and packed red blood cells, which is what you need for some of those surgeries. When we're looking at emergencies, you really want to be able to retransfuse whole blood and get that volume back into the patient. Is very important as well. So those are kind of some of the major benefits over a lot of the, I would say, premier autotransfusion device. Again, there's several different forms of autotransfusion. And then also looking at some of the environments that we're in, some of the advantages of being non-electric is it's very easy to grab off the shelf, and no matter kind of what the environment has for you, whether electricity is on or off. And it allows it to be also a backup as well as a frontline device for a lot of hospitals, especially when we start looking at the volumes in district levels, as well as more rural areas as well that have theaters.
Perfect. And I know you just mentioned something about whole blood. So can you just confirm that this is whole blood transfusion and not just something like red blood cells or platelets? Yes,
it's whole blood transfusion. Basically what you're suctioning in is filtering large clots and major particulates. It's a typical 170 micron filter, but then it's retransfusing all the other volume of the whole blood that you need.
Great. And there's a question just about any complications with clotting or oxygenation. Is that anything that you encountered, or is there a solution within the Hemafuse for that issue?
So the clotting in particular, I would say is most of the clotting is happening in this space. And so between having the kind of the yank hour tip, the filter, as well as when you have the infusion set, there's also a 30 to 40 micron reinfusion filter there. So there's less of a worry about getting clots or even air into the patient. As far as oxygenation, that shouldn't be a concern. That shouldn't be a concern related to this device because you're retransfusing blood back into the patient, and so it should be the same blood cells that you're seeing.
Okay, perfect. And then I know you mentioned that the pump can be autoclavable, but there's just some questions, I guess, kind of more generally about the components and what is reusable and what's not. And then so I guess I'll step back a second. How many uses is it expected that the Hemafuse can be used before it should be replaced?
So right now we look at 25 uses for the reuse, and we have as far as the sales model as well reflects that, we have basically you get 25 of these packets, which are all of the disposables in one. And then this can be one of these larger syringe components. So the nozzle, the barrel, and then the plunger is what it's called, that comprise the pump, basically, are the autoclavable components in particular.
Okay, so essentially after the 25 uses, that's when you would replace completely the full kit.
You would repurchase a full kit of those 25, yeah.
Okay, perfect. And so then the pump and the general components are sterilizable, autoclavable, everything else would be disposable. Okay, I think that answers quite a few questions people had, which is good. Let me see what else. I know we've touched on quite a few already. Were there any trials or studies that have been done that people can reference or at least understand what countries that it has been introduced for trials?
Yeah, so as far as trials and as far as the study, the biggest issue with autotransfusion devices in general is blood quality. And so a lot of the studies and things that we have done are more US based, and they relate to the blood quality and analyzing that blood quality. So I can certainly share a lot of that with you after the fact. There's also a clinical summary on our page on VIA Global Health. But in particular, we've also done basically, again, looking at that blood quality study in the field in Ethiopia, and are introducing it at several sites here in Kenya.
Perfect. So I guess a few questions just about the kind of the logistics and basics. Is there a warranty attached with the Hemafuse?
So as of right now, there is a warranty for if there's product defects in particular, but because of kind of the uses of the device and how many kind of consumables there are, there's not like an overall warranty for the other components right now.
Okay. And then where is the Hemafuse manufactured?
The Hemafuse is manufactured primarily in the US with a few other vendors outside.
Great. And then as far as training, I know you mentioned it's a fairly straightforward process and you're willing to support, of course, but have you found most clinicians or doctors that are introduced to this are quickly understanding it? Because obviously autotransfusion is a well-documented field, but the differences of this device, are people fairly receptive to how easy it is to use? Or do you expect our distributors would need to provide extensive training to any clinicians?
So I would say because autotransfusion, it depends on the market. So if autotransfusion is a known concept, some components of the device will be very readily understood. However, overall, we do ask that we have some sort of training outreach or training interaction with the distributors to either train them or have some sort of training involvement in addition to some of the videos and some of the pieces. So there's a few, it looks very, very simple, and it is, especially once you get the uses going, but there's just a few small steps that make a really big difference.
Perfect. No, that answers everything. It looks like most of the questions have been answered. If there's a few more that people have, now is the time. I'll just scour through a few just to see if there's anything further here. Just give me a moment to dig through the list. Okay, a few just about environments. Is there any kind of environments or, I guess, how do I ask this? Conditions that would limit what it can be used? I know the reference here in the question is certain devices can't be used in high humidity areas. Is there any issue with that Hemafuse for high humidity or dust particles in the air, things like that?
No, not in particular. There's definitely, it has to be a sterile environment. We advise this only for theater use. So it needs to be, in a sterile kind of component. As far as storage and things, it should be fine because in particular, this is maintained in a typical peel pouch that is resistant to a lot of kind of humidity or some of the other pieces. And then this would be autoclaved prior to surgery. And so as long as you're maintaining that typical sterile scenario, there shouldn't be an issue.
Great. And then we just had one more question come in. I know you touched on something with blood quality for your studies in the US, but the question is based on, do you feel, what is the major challenge that the Hemafuse addresses? Is it blood quality? Is it access to blood? Or is it cost? What's the major challenge that this is overcoming that the typical device would not be?
That's a great question. I think that a lot of doctors have told me the big challenge that this addresses is the issue of blood access in a timely and effective manner for a lot of different cases. It also addresses a lot of issues of cost and having access to that depending on the market, blood can be quite expensive or just not available at all. So I'd say blood access in general, which would include some of the cost components as well. Yeah.
Okay, great. And again, I'll share my screen again quickly. I have a few questions have come in. You can always reference the Via Global Health product page for Hemafuse. If you have any questions, specifications, ordering information, any brochure information, again, we'll have the video for this product after I've edited it together, and that will be on the product page as well. So you can take that link into your sales meetings or training meetings with your internal staff. But those are all the questions we have now, Katie. Anything else that we can touch on or anything that wasn't asked that you think is important?
I think, so again, I'll just reiterate, I'm in Nairobi for the near future. So if anyone is in the area in general, I would love to meet with you directly. And we could talk more about, some of the other market or training issues as well in person. Additionally, I think that, again, as a company that is really trying to work in emerging markets directly, we really see distributors as being a huge component of this. So I'm always open to learning more about what you all see in your interactions with clinicians, and if you're clinicians yourselves, related to blood access or related to how auto transfusion can really become a key technique in a lot of the hospital's uses for dealing with blood access and dealing with emergency surgery in general. So yeah, I just really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And there's, again, just a few more questions have come in about ordering, samples, pricing, things like that. If you have those questions, feel free to reach out to us directly. Here is the information. It's through email, through WhatsApp, or contacting your country representative from Via Global Health, or you can visit the website and request a quote directly through the product page. So with that, Katie, I just want to thank you and appreciate your time, and definitely we'll look forward to learning more about the Hemafuse and helping you spread the word about what this can provide.
Yeah, thank you too. Appreciate you all attending.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone, and we look forward to you on the next Via Live product training series.